Welcome to Overnight Wisdom, a show where we sit with change makers, artists, business leaders, and thinkers. Each conversation is an invitation to slow down, to go deeper, and unearth the quiet insights that shape who we are. If you're seeking honest reflections, unexpected wisdom, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to not merely survive, but to thrive, you're in the right place. Today's guest is Lola Akinmade, an award winning author, a National Geographic photographer whose work centers voice, belonging, and truths. In this episode, we talk about what it means to write with reverence, to resist dilution, and to choose rest as an act of courage. Lola doesn't just tell stories, she creates space for others to be seen, whole, and unfiltered. This is a conversation about reclaiming joy, legacy, and the importance of standing in your power. Let's begin. Hi, Laura. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
I'm doing all right. Really happy to see you. Yeah.
Likewise, likewise.
It's in preparing for this call, I was thinking about how we actually met each other. Because I think in the whole spectrum of things, we've actually not known each other for like many, many years, even though I feel like I've known you for a
It does feel
decade.
like that, right? It does feel like that.
Yeah. So I kind of went down like a rabbit's hole trying to figure out when was the first time we connected. And then all the messages were, not really from the first time we connected. But I figured this will be fun by tossing it to you. Like, how did we meet? Do you remember?
I thought it was LinkedIn, but I think it was the second year of the summit. Somebody from your team reached out to see if I wanted to come be involved, and I think from there it just organically
Mm.
kind of blossomed.
Yeah, the because it was second year of the summit, and one of my team had found you, and they wrote you, but you couldn't join us that year. You were going on a trip to Mongolia, and then you had said to us, "But invite me next time." And then I think we reached out next time, of course, and you were able to join, and then we kept connecting, and then we hosted your book launch, or kind of
Yes,
not a book launch, more like a road show in the
yes,
Nordics
like
with
the
Sweden
Nordic
and
tour.
Oslo. Yes.
Yes,
Very nice. And here we are. And now I'm feeling like, I have a big sis. I call you for support, moral support,
yes.
and it's been really great. So I'm so happy to have you here with me. I'm super excited for this conversation. And as you know me, I like to ask hard and deep questions when I
Yes,
can.
yes. That's the
So
only way to move through life, the add
absolutely.
questions.
Absolutely. So, in having or jumping right into the conversation, my first question to you, because you are a prolific storyteller. So, what compels you to tell stories,
Mm,
especially when those stories are often overlooked or misunderstood?
yeah, no. I think what compels me is actually fighting isolation, right? Because we as humans, we need each other, we need community to survive. We really do. And what drives me is trying to make us understand each other so we don't exclude each other. So we can create that community, we can support each other. And that also came from my own lived experience where I felt isolated and excluded a lot. When I was younger, just because of who I was, just because I wasn't maybe liking the things I was supposed to like as a Black woman or writing the things society said I should do. So that's what drives me is how can we create belonging? How can people feel like they have a community? And what's preventing that? What are the narratives that we're not telling of about each other that's preventing that kind of connection, that cultural connection?
Mm. I like what you say about narratives, and I think as two people who live in the Nordics, we know a lot
Yes.
about narratives. So for the listeners, I think it's important to say, like, I live in Oslo, Norway, and Lola lives in Sweden. So I want to ask you about your storytelling process. What part of it do you consider sacred?
Mm, mm. I think once you start telling other people's stories,
Mm,
then you have to do it with reverence. And that is sacred because they are giving you a piece of themselves. They are inviting you into their most private spaces so
mm,
you can share their story on their behalf if they're silent or if they're still afraid to use their own voice. And that also comes from my career as a travel writer, where I travel around the world and I have to bring back other people's stories. So I have to do it with that sacredness, with that reverence, with that respect, because I am just being the vessel to tell their stories as transparently, as multi layered, and as complex as they want to show to the world. So for me, that's the part of storytelling when I'm not telling my own story, but rather channeling other people's stories because they are not ready to use their own voices yet.
mm,
That part is, I think it's a big privilege.
mm. That's beautiful. You talked about silence. I mean, you just mentioned it briefly, but I want to engage that a little bit. How has writing changed your relationship to silence? And maybe
Mm.
first, maybe you can frame what silence actually means to you.
Mm. So I think silence, when it comes to storytelling, is knowing when to speak or not. But when I was younger, I felt like being silent was the way to not rock boats. But then I came across Zora Neale Austin's quote, which I think you know is if you stay silent, they'll kill you and tell you you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Right? When you say silence, telling it about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. And I always say that once you find your voice as a storyteller, you stop whispering. And so for me, when it comes to storytelling and silence, there are some things that I just can't stay silent on, especially when it has to do with my own humanity as a Black woman and other people's humanity, just the right to just exist. If
Mm,
that is being attacked, I can't stay silent. And so that came with age. Once you realize no matter what you do, it will never be enough if you are not part of setting those rules. So you might as well use your voice and tell your story. Otherwise, somebody will craft it on your behalf.
that is correct. I think you've been really great at, telling stories. I think stories that resonate across the globe. But I also just reflecting on your roadshow where we hosted you here in Oslo, and just the black and brown women in that room just feeling seen by the things you were saying, by the stories. I mean, somebody had said it was like going to church because everyone was like,
Um, right.
mm-hmm,
Mhm. Yes.
yes.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's quite remarkable, and I think, for people who are listening to this who are outside the Nordics, say, in North America, in Africa, wherever, one of the things to understand is that while we have a lot of great storytellers that mirror stories of Africans in Africa, or maybe even Black folk in Europe, no, in the Nordics as a whole, Lola is our holy grail, because she's telling
My
and
goodness.
talking about our stories, and I think it's so important, especially in a system where silence have been so, you know present and
Mm,
insidious, so people kind of just
mm,
accept that, okay, so we're not going to talk about this, and then
mm,
comes Lola and she's telling these stories bravely. And
mm.
so yes, thank you for that on behalf of
Thank
every black
you.
and brown girl
Thank you
around.
so much. Thank you.
Oh, I do want to lean in a bit about your writing because I can imagine that writing is a process of unraveling. I see myself unraveling this year. I'm writing a lot more. So I want to ask you, what has surprised you by what your writing has revealed to you? Even
Mm.
something that you weren't ready to face.
Mhm. Many authors say that writing can be very therapeutic. It's your own way of therapy. It's one way of saying the things you experienced were real by writing it down. So even though the stories I write are not specifically about my own experience, My life is sprinkled all over, in those stories as well. And for me, writing it out is accepting, okay, these are the things I maybe settled for. These are the things I maybe didn't stand up when I should have stood up. These are the places where I compromised, sacrificed, or self shrunk. Three different things, right? So, in as much as I write for others to feel validated and seen and not feel like they are always gaslit, it's also for me to reaffirm that, yes, this is also my own truth. This is my own experience in many ways, and a way of reclaiming and saying, once you know better, you do better as well. you know. And so that's kind of what the writing does for me as well. Is it's a way of growing and evolving and my own mini therapy as well.
That's beautiful. Um, well, you write across geographies and you literally take people across the world, right? I guess in terms of those identities that you center, whose gaze are you
Mm.
writing towards and whose gaze are you resisting?
I'm actually just writing the truth, right? So once you write the truth transparently, then there's always context. So I'm not writing for any gaze. I'm just writing the truth transparently within different contexts. And then, for example, my first book, In Every Mirror She's Black, some people said, oh, they didn't like that I was centering the white guy. I'm like, there's no reason Black women are going to come to the Nordics if not one, they fall in love with a white dude, two, either for work or as a refugee. And that's centering him, it wasn't even centered, right? It's more of showing how white supremacy permeates all aspects of society. My life as a travel writer, I always say, I don't tell you that Italy is beautiful, go to Italy. I have to show you through words. So I have to describe, the ringing of the cathedrals, the pigeons flapping across the square, the sounds of somebody yelling, Bella, I have to describe all those things. So you are immersed in the story and then come up with your own verdict that Italy is beautiful to go visit, right? And so that's what I do in my stories. I don't write for any gaze. I just tell the truth and I just share the stories as transparently as possible. And I think what makes my writing kind of interesting is it triggers a lot of people. So it triggers a lot of people's shadow work they need to deal with, and I think that's one of the beauties of just being an author, writing the stories that trigger people is that it's also showing, it's lifting a mirror to us to address some of our own biases or prejudices, or why is this character that's living a soft life triggering me? Or why is this character that wants to be a career woman, why is she triggering me? And so it's forcing us to also deal with ourselves.
Hmm. On triggers. And I guess when your work triggers people to, you know, both extremes and every gray shade in the middle, I guess my question for you is how do you navigate that duality of being both celebrated, because I know you're incredibly celebrated, but also scrutinized as a Black
Mm,
woman? And also, if you can frame that within a global literary space,
mm.
what does that feel like?
When I was younger, I probably would have cared, but now there's only one way I can show up in life, and that is fully and authentically myself.
Mm,
And if that draws criticism from other people, fine, that's not my camp. If that makes other people feel validated, or recently somebody wrote to me and said, thank you so much for your voice. Because you use your voice, I have started using mine. What more can an author get? That's the most incredible thing is by you standing up and using your own voice, it's letting people say they can use their voice because that's the only thing you kind of have left, right? And if you are in any space that wants to take your voice as in exchange for maybe like upward mobility, then that's on you to choose what you want to do. So, for example, when I first moved into Sweden, I kind of did all the right things, integrating, and I am well integrated. I'm just not assimilated. They are two different things, right? And so I was moving up, making the contacts until I got to a point where I started realizing I was going to have to give something up, which was my voice. And I always say that the higher you move in a place that requires assimilation, the less of who you are, right? And so I wasn't ready to just give up my voice to keep rising up the ranks in a society that wants me to fully assimilate and be. And so those are the things that you have to kind of think about, as you kind of live your life, live your truth as a storyteller. And the stories you share is, do you want to keep your voice, even though it might close some doors to you? And I'll give you an example. My first book, we got so many rejections because I didn't want to dilute my voice. Now I'm on my third novel and I'm writing whatever I want. Do you see what I'm saying? My second novel, I could write freely. My third novel is even more, it could probably provoke even more on another level. But because I didn't compromise in the beginning to dilute my voice, to make myself more palatable, for a white gaze, now I can write the stories I really truly want to write because I fought that battle in the beginning.
I guess there's a lesson there for all of us as well, right? Sometimes standing your ground and holding on to your authentic voice might mean a lot of no's, but eventually a door will open. And when you stand fast, when you hold the line, then it's easier with the next thing, anything after that. But if you give it up in the
Yeah,
beginning, then you just continue to give it up. And
yeah.
eventually, I think one day you wake up, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're not quite sure who's looking back at you. At least that's what I'm taking from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I say that if you keep breaking yourself into pieces for other people's consumption, you're never going to be enough. You're never going to be whole. You're in broken pieces. You're giving pieces of yourself all around. And that comes with time. That comes with, because we all made mistakes when we were younger. We felt we had to work twice as hard, be the smartest person in the room. We get that pressure. But after a while, we then realize it's never going to be enough because I'm not part of the people who made that structure in the first place. It's whoever made it needs to break it.
When we talk about this duality, I'm also thinking about belonging, right? You navigate, I mean, you've lived in Nigeria, you've lived in the US, you live in the Nordics now in Sweden, and you travel across the world. I guess my question here is what are the myths of belonging that you inherited, and which
Mm.
ones have you had to rewrite?
And I guess I'll tie that to the word home. What is home for you, right? And I think a lot of us get that when we've lived, in different places, we've moved through different communities. What is home? And home is tied to belonging as well. So I have removed the definition of belonging and home. I have detached it from place and I've attached it to space. So it can be a place where I feel comfortable, like Nigeria, where I can just slide in. It can be any space where I don't have to explain my existence in that space, right? So for me, when I played rugby for many years, kind of semi-pro, that was I felt belonging there because that was a space where I could just fully be myself and not have to explain my existence. Um, so that is what I had to redefine to get belonging, because if I keep feeling like I need to belong to a place, it will never be enough. But if I belong to a subset, for example, I am Afro-Swedish, that's a space where I feel like I fully belong, then that feels like a bit of home, right? So I just kind of stopped attaching belonging to a place and just said, different spaces where I don't have to feel like I need to explain. I feel like I can just be me fully and not have to wear a facade, a front. I have many friends that we kind of span different socioeconomic ranges, from refugees to those in the 1%. Can I be myself across all of those? And I think that is what I'm grateful for at this stage in my life, is that I can be the same Lola working in an asylum center, spending time with refugees, and be the same person if I'm at a gala. It's a lot of work, personal work, to be able to get to that point to say I am the same person regardless of any space you put me in.
That's really interesting. For I travel a lot for work, and these days I'm just like home is wherever I sleep.
Mm.
So there's
Yeah,
that initial
yeah,
context, and then of course home is wherever I'm with my kids and my husband, my
of
family.
course.
But one of the things I found well, not recently, just it came up for me again or reemerged is I spent Easter in Morocco,
Mm,
and the minute I just landed on the African continent, there's
mm,
also a different kind of feeling of home. Like, I mean, I don't know many people in Morocco. It's not where I'm
mm,
from, but there's
mm,
something about being on the African soil that I'm just like,
mm.
I land
Yes.
in a
Mm,
way. And
mm,
then there's also there's that grappling with the feeling of home shifting sometimes even when I'm in a new place. And I feel this every time I'm in any African country.
mm,
I'm just like I land. And of course,
mm.
the closer to sub-Saharan Africa, the more I land even
Yes,
more,
yes, yes.
because that's that feeling about home that I have.
Mhm.
Um,
You know what adds to that?
Tell me.
It's the minority stress, the removal
Mm,
of the minority stress. You feel it. It's subconscious. It's in the body.
mm,
The more you move to a place where you are majority,
mm,
or the stress kind of dissipates a bit.
yeah.
And it's the same feeling you get when you travel somewhere and then land in another country, like even at the airport, even on the plane, you already start feeling it in the body, that minority stress, even if nobody says anything, even if people are nice to you, you feel it.
Mm,
So that is why when people also move back home or say, oh, we get back to the continent, we just feel it's because you feel that stress dissipate. I'm in a place where there are more people like me. There are people that will understand me. There are people that like spices like me. Like you start getting into a space where, so that's what I think, and I think that's what I see, and that's what I feel when I go back home. But it's the minority stress of, is my existence enough?
yeah. I was
Yeah.
reflecting on that as well while in Morocco. I guess it's not like when I'm walking around in Europe or the US, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I need to be stressed. But I think there's something that just comes over me that I don't
Mm,
even recognize. I think it's a subconscious or like an unconscious state of being. And the only time I notice it's being different is, for example, when I land.
mm,
In a country in Africa, or when I'm in a room with my people,
mm.
regardless of where I'm at. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can just exhale.
Yeah, definitely. And also think about it. Outside of Africa or like places where Black women are the majority, we are the least protected in society in any space. So it's that vulnerability we feel when I'm in a place where it's majority white, then I know I'm the least protected person, gender wise, color wise, ethnicity in that space. So it's a fear as well. A
Mm,
subconscious, I don't feel safe 100%. Even though I might feel safe, physically, emotionally, mentally, it's a space that where I don't feel 100% safe.
mm,
Versus, yes, we know there are problems in Africa. There's all different kinds of cultural, even patriarchy, but I don't feel the same. I'm the least protected in society. So there's so many levels to this. It's so complex, it's so multidimensional that it can be very difficult to communicate, you know, to other people as well. You're like, well, but it's Europe, it's the trains run on time. You have 6 weeks vacations. I'm like, yes, those things are great, but there's something else, which is your mental health as well.
Thanks for articulating that.
Mhm.
Um, I want to talk about experiences that shape us, be it in becoming, be it in feeling like you no longer owe anyone an explanation for your existence, or be it in how you keep yourself rooted when you are moving between spaces and cultures and geographies. Do you recall an experience or a moment in time that cracked you open for that? Like
Mm,
before and after?
mm. There's so many kind of transition points, in life. For example, I knew the moment I wanted to be a travel writer. It's very specific in my mind and all of that. But I think there was a moment emotionally that really changed me. As a travel photographer, on that when I wear that hat, I move in spaces where it's mostly like white men that look like GQ models, and I'm competing with them, even though maybe their work isn't as good, but having to compete and prove myself in that space. So there was a time when I had been communicating with a camera brand, and I had used their cameras for many, many years. And so we had been communicating. And when I finally met the rep at an event where they were sponsoring my colleague, who is a National Geographic photographer, the way the woman treated me was like, just excuse me, essentially get out of my face. I'm talking to a customer here. And that moment shocked me. But what happened was when I went to my mentor at National Geographic here in the Nordics, there was a woman there, and I was telling her this story. I broke down and started crying. And I started crying, the kind of cry that you can't stop. When you're like, and I was crying and crying and crying because it wasn't about the gear or anything. It was about the way the woman had already said, you have no value. Who are you? You're a black woman. You're supposed to be doing something else. And so that moment, when I cried and cried that cry, and the lady was holding my hand, my mentor was a Vietnamese American woman. She also got it as a minority. But and when I say minority in this context, because we're global majority, right? But in that moment was when I started realizing nothing I do will ever be enough. Nothing I do will ever be enough. So you better start moving through life with the audacity and stop begging or chasing. And what happened was when I shifted that mindset, a few months later, Asoblad slipped into my DM. So an even better camera brand slipped into my DMs out of the blue saying, we've been watching you, we've been following your work, and we love you, and we want you as part of our family. So it opened space for something bigger and better. So that's one of the things that I started in life is if see myself chasing, because as a freelancer, we are in that hustle mode. When I begin to chase, I catch myself and say, stop chasing because something bigger and better will naturally come to you. And this happened even recently with with a different a travel agency where I'm trying to reduce freelancing, and they're just kind of doing this. And I told the guy, I said, you know what? If it's meant to happen, it will. I'm gonna stop chasing you guys.
Hmm.
Even after we've had many years of relationship. So that is one of the things I'm learning is when to stop chasing. That moment, that crying was when I realized I don't have to chase. If it's what's meant for you will come to you as long as you do the work and you're ready and prepared. And it's something we have to catch ourselves because sometimes we can feel desperate. We can feel like, but I have all these accolades, I have all these things. Why aren't people jumping into and I feel it now even. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm more than enough. And those that realize it will find me.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. The ones that truly value you and know your worth to come.
You are definitely more than enough. And I really liked what you said about audacity. The audacity to be, the audacity to exist as you are. I think that resonates significantly. I want to ask, given this audacity, the reality as well that you are often in rooms where you represent more people than yourself.
Mm.
How do you carry that responsibility?
So much is given, much is expected, right? I always think about that. I'll give you an example. When I was traveling around Uzbekistan, I took so many selfies with people. People are just coming up to take selfies because many of them hadn't seen a Black woman.
Mm.
And I felt like if I'm the only Black woman they see in their lifetime, I need to make sure that experience is great on behalf of all of us, right? Which is a stupid kind of burden to bear, but it means context. So it depends on what I'm trying to do or what context I find myself in. So in that context, yes, I was willing to carry the burden of all Black women so that if I have one great interaction with this person, then I'm chipping away their bias. Where maybe if they see us on TV as one narrative, then they can say, you know what, this is a different kind of narrative. Maybe they're a lot more complex. I don't know. But it depends on the context. When I go into the rooms, I also try to make sure we are seen as individuals because that is the privilege that we don't have as Black women, or even as a Black community, is the privilege to be treated as an individual. Because if I make a mistake at work or if I'm having a crap day at work, I don't want people to be like, oh, all Black women, they tend to be like bitchy like that, or they tend to be, this. No, it's Lola having a crap day. You don't know what happened that morning. It has nothing to do with Chisholm, who might be having a fantastic day, right? And so the responsibility I bear is by telling those stories in parallel. It's by sharing the narratives, it's by showing the different aspects of Black womanhood in those rooms I go in. So so it broadens views. And then it says, you know what? I love Muna. Kemi is all right, but and start treating people as individuals. You know, I think one of the things that can be quite irritating is when I go to a place and the person says, "Oh, you're from Nigeria. I know this guy from Nigeria. Do you know him?" I don't know. We're like 250 million. I don't know the one guy in remote Russia that's Nigerian. I don't know him, and that is what I'm trying to break. It's like a white woman won't go to another white woman and say, "Oh, you're from Ohio. I know Debbie from Ohio. Do you know Debbie?" No, it doesn't make sense.
Mm.
So that is through the work I do, is to show just how multi-layered, complex, different, diverse we are as a community. And so that's what I take into those rooms. And again, it depends on the context. Where where sometimes I may have to carry the burden in a specific context, or break down the barriers or chip away at the stereotypes in a different context. So
Hmm. Well, thanks for what you do. I know that it can also be quite exhausting to have to carry that weight, to have to walk into rooms and know how this goes depends on how people in this room see any other
mm,
person who remotely looks like me. And I think navigating that cross it's a lot.
yes.
But I think you do it beautifully, and also you're quite good at calling people to account and saying, no, this is not okay. I just want to acknowledge that that is not also easy to have to carry and bear that. I'm thinking about legacy, right? Because
Mm,
you've just talked about the cross you carry and and how you do so willingly, right? Because if you're in
yeah.
a remote place, you're the first of your kind that they've
Mm,
seen.
yes.
So how do you think about legacy? Maybe not in terms of achievement, but in terms
Mm,
of impact. Like, what
mm.
impact would you like to have?
Two reasons, right? I'm doing this for my kids because I'm raising kids who are from the Nordics, who still don't feel like this is their home, or made to feel like they are truly Nordic, even though they are, right? So I call it disturbing the soil, or at least airing the soil so they can grow. If you think about it, that's why we aerate soil. We till the soil so air can come in, so that the seeds can grow. And the Tilling of the soil, that's the discussions, that's having the difficult discussions so that it can create the environment for them to thrive. Versus if we just really pat down the soil, it's all frozen, the seeds, are not going to grow. They're not going to sprout. So that is what I'm doing. I think my legacy is not to disrupt, but it's to add the soil, to create the context for us to have difficult conversations around our table. Families have difficult conversations because they love each other. you know, if I love you, I want you to grow. And so that is what I'm doing with the work. And then, with the letter that lady wrote me about, because I'm using my voice, she's using as, that is the most incredible, heartwarming thing letter I could get is because you are, I am, because I see you, I can be. That is that is what this work really is all about, is to let people know that they're enough, to let them know they can show up, live authentically, use their voices, which is all they have, because strip everything away. All you have left is your voice, is, what, I can say this, I can choose to do this, I can go this way, I can do that around, I can oppose, you know. And so that's what hopefully will be the legacy, is to help people show up in their lives, to say, and also it can be cloaked in privilege because people were all suffering in many different ways. And one of my friends said, you can only hold your breath underwater for so long. You're going to have to surface for air, otherwise, you're going to die. And so that is what has given me grace around this region where people don't want to talk or don't want to share or don't want to shake the boat or don't want to um, rock anything. Is that's fine. Everybody has their own survival techniques. I would never judge how anybody chooses to mentally survive in any space. But remember, it's like holding your breath underwater. Sooner or later, you still have to surface for air to breathe. Otherwise, you're just going to drown.
Oh, I love that. Yes, there's only so much we can hold our breath at. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yes.
It's true. You have to surface at some point. You can
Yeah.
hold it for 3 years, you can hold it for 20 years. At some point, you're gonna surface. It may surface as a divorce, it may surface as something, but you still have to surface. And I'm great.
Absolutely. Lola, what does courage look like for you right now?
Mm. Courage has seasons, right? So I say courage can be the season of yelling and the season of silence. So I think of Michelle Obama when she skipped the inauguration quietly, said not a word. That's courage. That is silent courage, right? So right now I'm in my season of silent courage. I was in the season of like kind of the show up, especially in my first two books, really making noise and good noise, like we say, good trouble, to make sure that, in the face of opposition, in the face of systems that try to silence or change your narrative, showing up courageously. But now I'm in the season of when I'm silent about something, that means I've already spoken about the thing, you know. There was recently, I think it was April 5th, when they were doing like worldwide protests against, whatever. Somebody said, come to the protest and give a speech. And I'm like, no, I'm not available because I'd already made my
You
point
are
when I
resting.
voted. I'm resting. So right now is a courage is rest for Black women in the face of when, why don't you want to fight with me? Why don't you want to? No, it takes courage to say, you know what? I'm resting right now because I've been fighting and fighting for so many years, and you keep pulling the rug from under my feet. So now, courage to me is rest,
Mm.
is trying to look for the soft life, trying to build a life that prioritizes rest as a Black woman, that says your life should not be defined by struggle anymore. It has nothing to do with socioeconomic status. It's just, how can I thrive even in my smaller circumstances or even in my bubble? How can I find joy every day? How can I say that I am worthy of rest and relaxation and not always have to be the work mule of fighting in society?
Oh, I
That's
love
courage.
that. I love that. And that speaks to me. I think being in, your moments of joy and rest,
Mm,
and you know what? No, I'm not going to show up. I've showed up. I'm good. I'm
mm,
going to rest now. I love that. Yeah.
mm.
So needed. Well, is there something you've created that you no longer feel it came from you?
Nothing,
Nothing?
nothing, nothing,
Okay. That's great.
nothing.
Yeah.
Everything I've created has been intentional at that moment in that
Time.
time.
Got you.
And I always say, it always reminds me of an interview where the actor Jeremy Irons, I don't know if you know the actor Jeremy Irons, but he was in an interview and the host was pulling up photos of him when he was younger, saying that, oh, look at what you are wearing. Look at this. Are you embarrassed? Are you this? And Jeremy Irons is like, no, I'm not embarrassed by any of that stuff. Are you pulling this out to embarrass me? No, that is what we had at that time. That was the information I had at that time. Those were the clothes I had at the time. So I'm not embarrassed.
Mm,
But when you know better, you do better, you choose better.
mm,
So the information you have at that time is what dictates how you show up at that time. So there's nothing I've created, absolutely nothing I've created that I am not proud of, as long as I didn't go in and intentionally harm anybody or disrespect any communities.
mm,
You know, in fact, one of the books I'm most proud of is my Logan book
mm,
about the Swedish secret of living well, because that book is the book I wish I had when I first moved. It's very objective in the way it's written. It talks about the good and the bad very objectively, but I wish that book existed when I moved because then I could quickly see this is how the mentality is in the Nordics. And then I can adjust and instead of beating my head against the wall, I can walk around the wall, and things like that. In fact, in my online um, image bank where I share some of my photos, I have photos from like close to 20 years ago, bad quality, all of that. It's a visual history book to see where you came from. Exactly. To see where you were and where you came from to where you are today. So I'm not the person that constantly curates and trims and removes and says the best work right now, your latest work is your best work. And no, I need people to see a progression. This is where I came from
mm.
to where I am today.
Failing forward. That's what is coming up for me, and like
Exactly.
there's something quite remarkable about being an amateur, and
Mhm.
trying and
Yes.
improving in real time. I think it, at least for me, that resonates better where I see people where it's not perfectly glossed. It's just it's life. And
Yeah.
they show up anyway. And I think there's something quite remarkable about that. Um, I have a question for you about wisdom, since the title of
Mhm.
this podcast is Overnight Wisdom. Is there a wisdom you can share with us that came to you perhaps in the quiet, perhaps seemingly overnight, because we know wisdom is not overnight, or even like in a moment of stillness?
One of my absolute favorite verses is Be still and know that I am God. And I wear a bracelet that's called Be Still. It says Be Still. I give it out as gifts. And that comes, remember I told you about the chasing of the wind, as it were, the chasing of, okay, I'm enough. See, this is what I can do. And there was one morning, I was kind of reading through, writing the gratitude journal, and that came up. It's like, just be still. Be still. You are running around with your own efforts. I'm a Christian and I'm a woman of faith. So it's like, why are you running around on your own efforts when I can give you more, can provide more, and I call it the analogy of the parade. I listened to this, it was at a sermon. It's called the analogy of the parade, where if you think about a parade that's coming down the street, with like all the floats and everything, there's the reporter on the ground, and then there's a reporter in the helicopter. They're both talking. So the reporter on the ground can only see the part of the parade that comes in front of him, and it's like, oh, look at this beautiful Barney or Mickey Mouse float. Oh my God, this is gorgeous. The reporter in the helicopter says, oh, if you think that was cool, just wait on what's coming around the corner. I can see the beginning and the end of this parade. Oh, you thought that bunny float was cute? Just see what's coming around the corner. So when I start feeling like I have no idea what's coming tomorrow, and I'm right now in a season of that, I have no idea what's next. I really am right now. But I know that I need to be still because I need to surrender to God. So that is the wisdom I try to take in is just show up as prepared as you can in life so that when the blessings come, you're ready. You don't have to know the answers to everything. Just know that what can you do today, you know, to make your life worthwhile, to make the lives of others worthwhile. You don't have to know everything. And I think that can be difficult for people is we want to control everything. We can't. But what we can do is if we're still, we stop chasing crazily. I mean, obviously we still need to also a little bit, but just stop chasing everything. Then it will make space for what needs to find us to find us. I truly believe that. And that's based on experience. So that's the kind of wisdom that has come to me is to be still, is just be still. When things feel like you have no idea where things are going to go, just be still. Be
Mm.
still.
Hmm. I love that. Thanks for sharing. I think
Mm,
there's something powerful in preparing as best as you can and then be still because what is for you, I think there's a running thread here in what you're
it
telling
is.
us. What is for you will come to you. I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. Um,
Mm,
I feel like I could sit here and talk to you
yeah.
forever,
Yeah.
but we have to stop talking at some point. But I do
Yeah.
want to ask you perhaps a last question here around if the younger Lola can see you now, what would make her proud? And what would leave her in just a state of awe?
What will make her proud is that she stuck to her voice. Her voice has matured, but she didn't choose to be someone else, and that was what made me isolated and excluded a lot because when I was younger, I already had a good sense of who I was, even though I couldn't maybe articulate all of my desires and dreams but I had a strong sense of self. And so I kept my voice, in the sense like my metaphoric voice. This is what I like. This is the kind of stories I like to tell. This is what moves me. And I kept communicating that. And when people didn't understand that, I kept screaming that metaphorically through my work is this is who I am. And so if I go back to my younger self, I would say one, I'm proud of you doing that. But two, I wish you had stopped chasing earlier. I wish you had just existed in your truth. Of course, there's society and other factors, but that's what I would have said, is you could have stopped that earlier, you know. But I think one of the things that would surprise, and I don't know if it will even surprise my younger self, but I had always loved geography. I've always wanted to be part of National Geographic. And so for that to come to fruition in many ways, in different angles, I think my younger self would be blown by that. Maybe not surprised, but just like, oh my God, it really happened,
Mm,
right? And so I'm just grateful, that I get to do this. It's not easy work, but it's not sometimes the most lucrative work,
mm,
um, but it is the work that makes my soul sing.
mm.
And for that I am truly and deeply grateful.
Right. I think I'm actually aligned. I'm going to sneak in one more question here because something just came up for me. One of the
Yeah.
things I quite incredibly fascinating and inspirational about you. I mean, you lead expedition into like the most random, most remote places, right? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how does she do this? And I
Yeah.
mean, you've been featured everywhere, which I think is also quite beautiful. And right now, you also talked about like sometimes it's not even about the lucrativeness of this,
Mm.
of this work. So I do want to ask you just quickly for people who are listening who are aspiring writers or aspiring travel writers or people who want to take people on journeys and experiences, in building a business, because essentially you have a business. What do they need to know?
You need to know their why. Why are you doing something? Because if you don't know your why, you're going to get frustrated. You're not going to have longevity in the industry. that you choose. I always say, why do you want to be a travel influencer? Why are you in travel? Because travel itself is not your purpose. That's just a route or a channel for your purpose. Your purpose is something you can do both at home and while you're traveling. So that is what I try to tell people is why do you want to do what you're doing?
Mm,
If they can actually articulate their why, then I think they'll be all right.
mm,
But if they can't fully articulate it and they feel like it's, what they need to be doing now, I call it trends. I call it like surfing the waves of trends versus swimming in a trend. Trends come and go. Trends are like riptides. So if you're swimming in every trend to stay relevant, you can drown. But if you surf the trend, just use the tools while still going with the waves, then it's harder for you to drown because you're not swept in by the trend. So focus on your natural progression and evolution as a storyteller versus trying to always stay relevant.
right.
Because when you always try to stay relevant, that is when um, it's not sustainable.
Mm. And it
It
doesn't,
just isn't.
it lacks that authenticity. It's not you.
Exactly.
When you're trying to like
Exactly.
stick with what is trendy, you lose
Exactly.
your voice maybe in that process as well.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
you should be aware of trends. You should use the tools, but your audience kind of changes as you grow. I
absolutely.
cannot have the same audience when I was 20. It's different. And I
Absolutely.
need to make space for that. I don't need to compete,
Yes,
you
absolutely.
know,
And your
for the
audience also
attention.
grows with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So
This has been lovely, Laura. You are
yeah.
amazing and inspiring.
Thank you
As
so much.
always, I love you so much. Thank you for your
No,
time.
it's
And it's
mutual. I love you, love the work you do, just love everything about you. So yeah, it's mutual.
thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you. See you soon. And yeah,
Yes.
I look forward to the next time we'll talk.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for spending time with us on Overnight Wisdom. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please like, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, a rating or review goes a long way in helping others find us too. Until next time, stay curious, stay tender, and may the wisdom you need find you exactly when you're ready.